Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 12th of June of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to discuss the missile strike that took place during the previous night local time. We have already covered this topic in the morning update, but we got additional updates of what kind of targets the Russians managed to hit and to destroy as a result of that attack. So if you remember, I pointed your attention to this small point above Poltava area, wondering what exactly the Russians were doing there. And today, somewhere at let's say 4 or 5 p.m. of the local time, we got details of what exactly the Russians were targeting in this area and what they managed to destroy. This is the video. Let's take a look at this video. In this video, we can see how the Russian drone was flying above, let's say, in the vicinity of Mirgorod, the airfield that Ukrainians were using to attack the territory of Russian Federation, Lugansk People's Republic, with, let's say, cruise missiles. In this video, we can see how the Russians managed to, let's say, discover the positions of S300 system, and as a result of Iskander strike, that S300 system was destroyed. As you can see, that system was completely fully loaded with missiles, because after the first attack we see the secondary detonation and uncontrolled, let's say, launching of missiles by that air defense system. Now let's move further a bit to the west, because the Russians first destroyed the air defense system. After that, the Russians start hunting and attacking the Ukrainian positions on Mirgorod airfield. As a result of reconnaissance operation, the Russians found additional Su-24, Su-25 and Su-27s of the armed forces of Ukraine, and also as a result of Iskander strike, a few aircrafts were destroyed. So that was the reason why the Russians were flying above this territory for so long. Now let's move to the line of combat contact. We have additional updates from Kharkiv. The Russians continue their offensive operation in this direction. If you remember, during the previous few days we were talking a lot, more precisely the group of forces north were talking a lot about additional progress and additional attempts by the Russian forces to attack in direction of Zeleny, but yet we haven't received even a single geolocation or any video confirming that the Russians are doing something in this direction. We were receiving just the videos of let's say artillery strikes or something like this. And today we got additional video of how the Russians were hunting and attacking the Ukrainian artillery systems, let's say artillery forces, manpower, temporary positions, warehouses, just regular equipment, and many other military assets in this direction. As a result of Russian strikes, significant number of forces were destroyed and the Ukrainians suffered significant losses. Furthermore, the group of forces north reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to improve their positions along Murom River. So this is the river Murom, and as you can see, the village of Zeleny is located along the river. So most likely during the next few days we will start updating their map, and probably in a week or two, if Ukrainians are not going to change something, the Russians will capture this territory completely. Just take a look at the number of geolocations from this direction during the previous 24 hours. Now let's move to Volchansk. We have additional updates. According to the Russians, there are still very heavy clashes in Volchansky aggregatny plant, but without any geolocated confirming this. The only thing we have is just a few, let's say, aviation strikes in the vicinity of the, let's say, industrial zone. We can see the redeployment of Ukrainian forces, how they were taking positions, and we see the work of Russian reconnaissance drones, how the Russians were discovering the Ukrainian positions, and as soon as discover something, they destroyed it with, let's say, FAPs or artillery strikes. So this is just a view of aggregatny plant as well, and the situation in the southern part of the northern Vovchansk. Also, we have interesting report from the northeastern part of Vovchansk, because if you remember, during the previous few days, the Russians were saying that Ukrainians were counter-attacking by 82nd Mechanized Brigade, by, let's say, a 36th Marine Brigade. Those attacks were repelled. According to the Russians, the 82nd Brigade lost its combat capabilities, and starting off today, the Russians renew their own attempts to attack the Ukrainians in the northeastern and the eastern directions, and according to the Russians, they managed to improve their positions for another few hundred meters. Now let's move further to the north in Kupiansk direction. We have lots of very interesting updates. As you can see, we have significant number of geolocations and significant number of videos of how the Russians were destroying and ruining the Ukrainian logistic. The Russians published additional videos of how they destroyed few more bridges, few more pontoon bridges, warehouses among the fields, the bridges along the Skol River, and many other important logistic, let's say, military assets. About bridges, also one important statement that the Russians reported that Ukrainians during the previous few days managed to restore this dam in the vicinity of Stare Salto for the third time in a row, and once again the dam was destroyed, so probably we're going to receive additional updates very soon. Now let's move to Stepovo-Novoselka. After the Russians captured this small field, we discussed this yesterday, they continue moving further, and now the Russians are clearing the area to the west with the purpose to break the Ukrainian defense belt and to move and to continue movements further to the west in direction of Petropavlovka. As of Stepovo-Novoselka, we haven't received anything about additional Russian progress. There are very heavy clashes around the village, but without any changes on the ground. The same story about Mesozharevka. The Russians yesterday reported about complete control over the village, and during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything about from this area confirming additional Russian, let's say, movements or additional Russian progress. Now let's talk about Siversk direction. As you can see, we have a lot of geolocations from this territory. The most important update is that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, established complete control over this very big stronghold. As you can see, that is located in the eastern part of Verkhnyokamyanska, and after the Russians captured this territory, they continue moving further to the west. The Russians immediately start publishing additional videos of how they were bombing and attacking with FPV drones the Ukrainian positions in the eastern outskirts of Verkhnyokamyanska, which confirms that the Russians are about to answer the eastern part, and if the Russians are able to do this, then they will start moving along the streets further to the west in the western direction with the purpose to get as close as possible to Siversk. So the situation for the Ukrainians in this direction is getting worse and worse. About Avdiivka, if you remember, during the previous days we got a lot of updates that these, let's say, trenches, these fortifications were captured by the Russians, but we haven't received even a single geolocation confirming this. And today the Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning the Russians in this area, and based on one of the geolocations was located here. So based on that, let's say, video, we have adjusted the map and added this territory under complete Russian control. So now we can see that the Russians currently are moving along the railways in direction of Avdiivka. The Russians are pummeling and reducing to ruins Spornaya, and of course the Russians are moving from Verkhnyokamyanska to Siversk. So these are three main Russian directions of attack, and these are three directions that the Russians are planning to develop during the summer. And most likely, somewhere by August or maybe by September, the battle for Siversk is going to start. Let's say concerning Chasiv Yar, we haven't received anything during the previous day, just regular updates, some FPV drone strikes. We haven't received even some, let's say, message posts about the situation on the ground. So most likely the Russians are about to finish the clearing of the eastern part, but they're trying to keep some silence and not to get a lot of information outside of this small stronghold. Now we are moving to Avdiivka direction. As you can see, we have a lot of geolocations. So let's start from the northern part. If you remember, we were talking a lot during the previous days that the Russians captured Novoaleksandriivka. We called this territory another flower after Ocheretina. We were talking like Novoaleksandriivka flower and many other interesting things. Today in the morning, we got report that the Russians captured completely the dam. This territory was captured. Later, we got additional updates that entire Novoaleksandriivka is under complete Russian control, but a little bit later we got the video of how the Russians were attacking and bombing the Ukrainian positions with Krasnopol in the southern direction of the water reservoir, which confirms that there are still some Ukrainian positions in this area. And summarizing everything, we see that there are still clashes inside of the village. Maybe the Ukrainians managed to bring additional reinforcements and reserves, managed to stabilize a bit the situation, but it will not allow them to restore their lost positions or to stabilize the the situation completely. It will give them just few days, maybe weeks, but maybe not even weeks, but just few days, and the Russians will capture the village completely. Anyway, regarding the progress, regarding the posts, we got also geolocation from the Ukrainian sources. In this video, on some seconds in some episode of this video, we can see how the Ukrainian FPV drones were bombing the Russians in this part of Novoaleksandriivka, and based on that video we have adjusted the map by adding additional territory to the area of Russian control. So this small red square was captured by the geolocatedly captured by the Russians during the previous 24 hours. Once again, according to different sources, this entire white cloud is under complete Russian control already. Now let's move to Sokol. There are very heavy clashes, and currently the Russians are storming the western, let's say, part of the village. The Russians are bombing the territory heavily, so they're just trying to force those Ukrainians who left in this area to abandon their positions and to withdraw this area completely. I think that we can start counting days, maybe 1-2 days, and this territory will be captured for 100%. We have few more armored vehicles that were also destroyed as a result of Russian FPV drone strikes. On this video we can see a Ukrainian Bradley that was attacked and damaged by the Russian FPV drone. Very interesting updates are coming from Novopokrovske. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers, this territory was completely captured by the Russians. Not like completely, but according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, this village was captured for more than 50%. 50-60% was captured, and the rest 40% is already in the gray zone. So as we discussed in the previous updates, currently the Ukrainians are trying to abandon their positions, to withdraw their positions, let's say, in the fields, in Novopokrovsk. They're trying to concentrate and to save as many as possible armored vehicles of Western production inside of Novoaleksandriivka, and currently they're trying to make this process organized, and but if the Russians increase the pressure, most likely this process will stop being organized and the Ukrainians will just run away, as they usually let's say did in the vicinity of Orlovka, Semyonovka and Avdiivka as well. So the Russians are pushing and pushing and pushing. Furthermore, the Russians of course try to slow down the Ukrainians, try to force the Ukrainians to keep as many as possible let's say Western armored vehicles. So that's why they almost every single day they publish another video of how they destroy or try to destroy pontoon bridges, dams in this area, trying to slow down the Ukrainians as much as possible. Now we are moving further to the south. We have additional updates from Pervomayskaya territory. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning the Russians in Nivoyska. So based on that video, we have adjusted the map showing additional Russian progress. These fields were captured by the Russians. The Ukrainians probably still have some positions in the northwestern farms, but currently I believe that there is the same process as we can see in the Novoselovka Persha. The Ukrainians are trying to abandon fields, to abandon their positions, and to evacuate as many as possible personnel and manpower to the fields and further to Zhelana Persha and to the next defense belt. So as I understand, due to the geolocations, most likely during the next few days the Russians will establish complete control over the fields that located on the right, in the right side of this red line. Krasnogorovka, we haven't received anything, as well as we haven't received anything from Georgievka. I'll remind you that just according to different sources, the village is already under complete Russian control. The last more or less reliable report from this direction we received on the 17th of May, so around a month ago. After that, no activity from the Russian side at all. Now we are moving to Konstantinovka, Poroskoevka, South Donetsk direction. The Russians continue hunting the Ukrainian positions, conducting successful counter-artillery duels. Few more artillery systems, warehouses, ammo depots, armored vehicles were destroyed as a result of counter-artillery duels and counter-artillery attacks. So the Ukrainians suffer losses and they still haven't managed to stabilize the situation. On the other side, we continue to receive a lot of reports from the 79th Brigade. They reported that during the previous days, the Syrsky himself arrived in the area, but he wasn't allowed to, he was stopped, let's say, few kilometers, not even a few kilometers, but few tens of kilometers from the line of combat contact by the local commanders. He had the meeting with them, and after a very short meeting, when he realized the current situation, he abandoned their positions and moved, let's say, to some Kharkiv maybe direction, or maybe to Kherson direction, trying to understand what is happening there. Anyway, we see problems with reinforcements. this is the main problem for this direction, is complete absence of additional reinforcement. The Ukrainians reported that recently the 235th battalion was redeployed in this direction, but they were defeated as a result of, let's say, 3, 4, 5 days of clashes with Russians, and now there is a very big problems between, let's say, forces that have already lost its combat capabilities and those forces that are about to be sent on the line of combat contact. So one side doesn't want to go and other side doesn't want to go as well, but somebody should be sent, and nobody wants, of course, to be sent. Now we are moving to South Donetsk direction, to Vremivka tactical bridgehead. As you can see, after the Russians captured Staromayorska, we stopped receiving any updates. Probably there is operational pause, or the Russians are about to finish the clearing of Urozhaina. They just try to keep everything without, let's say, loud updates, and try to keep everything silent. Zaporozhye direction, we haven't received anything as well, just regular activity. As of Kherson, during the previous 24 hours, we got significant number of updates, mainly from Ukrainian side of Dnipro River. The Russians published up to 6 or 7 geolocations of how they were hunting, attacking, and destroying the Ukrainian positions, the Ukrainian FPV drone bases, air defense systems, the warehouses, temporary positions, and the activity is very big, as you can see, and it's a very big question whether Russians are trying to do, or they managed to discover the Ukrainian forces, or maybe the Russians do have some plans for further attempts to cross even the river or to clear the islands between the banks. Very difficult to understand. Very interesting updates are coming also from the Ukrainian side. You know that Ukrainians currently have very big problems with air defense. They don't have missiles, they have problems with air defense launching systems, so that's why the Ukrainians understand that they need to find some solutions. And just during the previous 24 hours, we got 2 videos of how the Ukrainians were trying to bring down the Russian reconnaissance drones like Zala type with FPV drones. On this video, we can see the Russian drone flying above Kherson direction, making a reconnaissance operation, and the drone was damaged and attacked by Ukrainian drone. So, of course, it's much cheaper than to use air defense missile, but it's more difficult, of course, much difficult in comparison with missile. But in Ukrainian case, it's sometimes difficult means cheaper, which means, let's say, even better result. So the first video we got in the vicinity of Achakov. The next video we got in the South Donetsk direction. In this video we can see almost the same picture. Another Russian Zala type reconnaissance drone was flying above the territory trying to find Ukrainian positions, and Russian drone was hit and attacked by the Ukrainian drone. So as I understand, this is going to be the next, let's say feature of the armed forces of Ukraine, because they don't have missiles and they will try to bring down the Russian drones with their own drones, because first of all it's much cheaper. As you know, today Russia celebrate a Russia Day, the Russian Day, so that's why most of the military experts and most of the people were expecting the attempts from the Ukrainian side to attack Crimea, and according to some sources there was an attempt from the Ukrainian side to attack, but most of those Ukrainian missiles were brought down by the Russians. During the day we can find, let's say, significant activity of Global Hawk of NATO in the Black Sea. He's still flying, trying to make reconnaissance operation. Also we have additional Boeing, let's say of the French Air Forces. He joined this NATO Global Hawk, and now together they try to understand and investigate the situation in Crimea and in the old Russian territories. Maybe the Ukrainians are planning to attack a Crimean Bridge in Russia during the upcoming night. Very interesting updates, political updates were received from Armenia. According to information we have, according to the Prime Minister of Armenia, Pashinyan, Armenia will leave the Collective Security Treaty Organization. This is the military alliance led by Russian Federation, and which was created as a counterweight to NATO. So this is very interesting piece of news, and people start wondering why Armenia is going to do this. But if you're familiar with the situation during the previous few months, Armenia, let's say, abandoned a lot of villages, a lot of towns along the border with Azerbaijan, trying to resolve the conflicts, possible conflicts, and this is one of the, let's say, important paragraph that Armenia should complete if this country wants to join European Union or NATO. They shouldn't have any problems or any conflicts for territories along the borders with other countries. And as you can see, Armenia completed this paragraph, and most likely they will try to do this in the very near future. On the other hand, we continue receiving very interesting updates from the United States of America, more precisely from Cuba. Today is Wednesday and the Russian fleet entered Havana. We have a lot of videos, lots of very interesting updates of how the Russian nuclear fleets, nuclear missiles with different types of weapon entering Havana. Of course, this is something that United States of America doesn't like very much, so that's why during the day lots of ships, lots of aircrafts, reconnaissance aircrafts were flying in the vicinity of Cuba, trying to let's say conduct reconnaissance information, trying to collect and to keep the situation controlled. But of course, regarding even all these attempts, we understand that this is not a very pleasant thing for the United States of America, because if we calculate the distance from Havana to, let's say, the closest more or less big town in the United States of America, it's very, very short. It's a very, very short distance. The distance just from Havana to United States is around 300 kilometers or 168 miles. So this is the period of time when the modern Russia is with the nuclear weapon is as close as possible to the United States of America. And that's it for this video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.